Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the Stratosphere Studio. We got both streams up and running. It's a technical feat that I would say is roughly on par with what SpaceX accomplished with catching their booster. It's true that it's probably not as difficult to run two streams as it is to catch a rocket coming down from space at Mach 4. But I might point out they had more people than I do. So I hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, I don't know. I've just been actually feeling pretty groovy about the political scene, the pop culture scene. And I'm, well, you know what? I'm not going to tell you what I'm planning on doing, because every time I tell you what I'm planning on doing, I end up automatically shifting into bill time, and that's not going to do anybody any good. But hopefully we're going to be seeing more of that kind of commentary that we had for the SpaceX booster landing, because that was just hot off the presses and just good to be in a good mood. I really have felt, I had personal ups and downs like everybody else, but I felt much more optimistic in the last several weeks. I did 5 trips to Idaho since May. The first one was to say goodbye to my friend Dick Rutan. The second and third ones were to do a memorial for him up in northern Idaho. The fourth one was to go to Oshkosh Air Show, which we did out of there, and we got to fly in Burt Rutan's Starship, which is also another pretty cool Starship, I got to tell you. And then the last one I went up, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, for a speaking engagement, and I just am so, every time I go out on the road, I'm just so completely refreshed. A lot of people seem happy at the end of the speaking events, which makes me happy, but I actually feel better than they do. And I don't know. I just look out there and feel like the country's in really good shape. As we are just about to go on the air here, just finished my right angle segment, which will be up first thing in the morning. We tape our new right angles tomorrow morning. But I went out and saw a football game locally. I guess it would be 2 Fridays ago, and hung out with a bunch of alphas, and I thought these kids were terrific. I didn't see any of that kind of, I didn't see, when I was a private school, it was a Catholic private school, that's obviously the major filter. But with that said, I didn't see any purple hair, didn't see any piercings, didn't see any tattoos. I just saw a bunch of friendly kids having a great time at a football game, just the way we used to, and I was so happy and so impressed. I'm just feeling good. I'm also feeling good about this is our entertainment show, but we just kind of do this as just sort of a general timestamp. Things are starting to shift. I'm feeling really good about this election. As of the moment, Donald Trump is at 54.1%. Kamala Harris is at 45.4%, so we're down to less than almost a 10-point lead. And I've said this many times before, I'll say it again, it's not so much that this is more accurate than polls, although I think it's more accurate than most polls. The one thing that is indisputable about this is that I've been checking the same source again and again, so I watch it go up, I watch it go down. It may be off, but whatever it's off by the same kind of thing. Yeah, I'm feeling, no, don't get cocky, kid. No, you better not believe it. You better believe it. Got my mail-in ballot. I could have started voting. I could put my vote in already. One of the things that we're doing differently this year as a party is last year we said, no, the early voting is evil. Let's not do that. Let's all just vote on election day like we're supposed to. Well, not anymore. I'm getting my ballot in good and early, and if I find a couple ballots lying on the street, I think I'll fill them all out and mail those in too. Very formal tonight with a collared shirt. Yes, well, thank you. It's a gator collared shirt. But I love the gator blue. Is just the most beautiful blue of all college teams. So is gator orange. If you've ever been to Florida Field, otherwise known as the Swamp, then you have experienced something colorful, to say the least. So yeah, so feeling good about all that, and I was, again, I understand it's a Catholic school and it's a private school, and it's expensive. So there's a big filter there. But I didn't see a single tattoo. I didn't see a single piercing. Um, these kids are technically speaking, they're the tail end of Gen Z, but they felt different. They look like these alphas, and they are not raised by. Uh, they're raised after peak woke. So I'm feeling solid about all of that. Um, I had some interesting thoughts since this is our entertainment show. I was watching Nerdrotic's show. I sent him an email actually saying, "Hey, I sure would like to be on that panel show." But he was talking about Patton Oswalt, who I'm not a fan of. He's a unpleasant fellow. I haven't met him directly, but I've been in the same room with him, and I didn't uh, particularly like his vibe very much. Um, and and they were talking about how Patton Oswalt said that the new season of Rings of Power is much deeper and much more dramatic because they're humanizing the orcs. And and so let me just recount. I just wrote Gary. I said, "Hey, listen, just as an audition piece to get on your panel show, you know." I was talking back to the screen when they were talking about this subject of humanizing the orcs. For those of you not up on current events, J.R.R. Tolkien's estate licensed certain aspects of Lord of the Rings to Amazon, and they've made a series called The Rings of Power, which has some of the same characters as Lord of the Rings, but is written by people who have no life experience and who not only don't understand Tolkien at all, their entire ethos is predicated on the opposite of him. So nobody knows why this show is doing so badly. They're utterly mystified. So basically, I just sent Gary an email just saying, "Hey, man, you know, I got some things to say about this that might be worth something if you're interested." I don't know if he'll write back or not. I don't even know if this email is still valid, but in any event, so Patton Oswalt and I'm going to use him just as an example for the Hollywood ilk. You know, he's more of a stand-up comic, but he's obviously been in many movies. He was the voice in Ratatouille, and is pretty representative of that kind of cynical thing. He and Dave Cross and those guys all make fun of the same things. They have a lot of laughs about religion, religious people. They have a lot of laughs about regular people. They think the South is filled with, you know, knuckle-dragging racists and all the rest of the things that you're supposed to believe if you're a highly educated member of the Hollywood elite who don't know, you know, well, they just don't know shit from Shinola, to be honest with you. So research that says maybe the show, I'm sorry, says maybe the show's not doing so well because it sucks. It isn't doing so well because it sucks, and it does suck. And one of the reasons it sucks is the reason that Patton Oswalt was defending, that by humanizing the orcs, it made everything much more interesting. For those of you who didn't hear about this, in Rings of Power, the orcs don't want to go to war. They're an oppressed people. They're migrants, really, you could say. They're undocumented undead, and they have families now. And they showed an orc who didn't want to go to war. He just wanted to stay and be peaceful because that's what orcs are. And his orc wife, horrible orc wife, and he puts his arm around her, and there's a little orc baby, and we're supposed to feel sorry for the orcs. And I just did a quick analysis of this. People are saying, hey, Eric says, no, everybody's just, only people watching it or hate watching it, but it's not, I'm not doing this because I want to beat up on Rings of Power. I'm doing this because what they're doing to Rings of Power is important politically. It's that intersection of politics and pop culture that we're trying to hit on these Stratosphere Studio shows. So what I basically wrote was, look, before I did this, I was an editor in Hollywood for many years, and for the last 5 years, I was editor of Sunday Morning Shootout, which was a movie talk show with Peter Bart and Peter Guber. Peter Bart was a mega producer at the time. Peter Guber was the editor-in-chief of Variety magazine, so these are insiders. So over 165 episodes that I edited, I got to see footage from before the shows, while they were rolling, but before they were on. Got to hear those conversations. Got to hear conversations after they'd yelled, they called cut. I got to know these people who work in Hollywood very, very well. And as a type, just having seen we did 165 episodes, but often we'd have 2 or 3 guests on a show. So I saw hundreds of celebrities, and I saw them in off-guarded moments. Some of them are terrific. Denzel Washington is a great guy. I was impressed by Lawrence Fishburne. Needless to say, Clint Eastwood is a legend. I thought Tom Cruise seemed like a nice guy. But we did a couple of episodes with Michael Moore. We did at least 3 with Harvey Weinstein. We did some with other producers who just showed how rapacious and morally blind they were. And so I got to know the type. We did some with some people who are just plain awful people. What's his name, that director who basically managed to be so perverted he even put himself out of business? He looks a lot like Jonah Hill. Looked a lot like Jonah Hill. He was huge for a while, got a couple of big shows, and then he would go to casting directors and come out, pleasuring himself into the room filled with these actresses. What the hell was his name? I'm glad I've forgotten. In any event, no, it wasn't Joss Whedon. It wasn't Polanski. No, this is a younger guy. He was real big, and then suddenly I think he was too gross even for Hollywood. It'll come up. No, not Shia LaBeouf. Anyway, I'll keep Brett Ratner. Thank you. Yeah, it was Brett Ratner. He was unpleasant and very, very full of himself and very confident about the talent that he didn't have. So anyway, but I got to thinking about what I would have said if I'd been on that panel show, and this is my 3 main reasons why. It's not so much about Tolkien as it's about Hollywood. Why would the writers of Rings of Power want to humanize orcs, and why would people like Patton Oswalt think this is a good thing? So this is my response to that. I basically said I understand who these people are and what they believe. These are 3 points I would have made on the Oswald show regarding the reason that Hollywood elites want to humanize freaking orcs. Number 1, Tolkien's entire appeal is predicated on one simple, profoundly deep principle, namely that there is such a thing as absolute good and absolute evil. You can't humanize orcs because if you do that, they're not orcs anymore. Modern progressives like Oswald are libertines. They want to be able to do whatever they want all the time, and many of the things that they want to do are absolutely evil. Therefore, the entire concept of absolute good and absolute evil have to be destroyed. This is why they feel sorry for the orcs. They don't want an absolute evil. They don't want something that is not nuanced, something that you can't talk your way out of. You can't if the way orcs were written, well, I'll get to what the way orcs were written. But orcs represent absolute irredeemable evil. They want to eat man flesh. They're not concerned about their families. They live for war, and if they can't eat people, they'll eat each other. They're just plain monsters. And when you try to humanize a monster that is a genuine monster, it's not a misunderstanding. When you try to humanize a monster, what you're trying to do is you're trying to walk down evil. You're trying to make evil morally relative. The second point I made was that if the orcs are human enough to be worthy of mercy, and otherwise if you humanize, they've got families, maybe we shouldn't kill them, they just want peace and so on. I said if the orcs are human enough to be worthy of mercy, then that means they're also human enough to be capable of mercy. If you're deserving of mercy, you have to be capable of mercy. If you're dealing with somebody who take no prisoners, kill all the prisoners, those people don't get mercy. So if you're trying to say that these orcs are just regular family guys and are worthy of mercy, then they've also got to be able to deliver mercy because they've got a soft side, right? So, to recap, if the orcs are human enough to be worthy of mercy, then that means they're human enough to be capable of mercy, which means you can, in fact, negotiate your way out of Helm's Deep. The undifferentiated, non-individual mass of orcs that we saw at Helm's Deep are not an army the way we really normally understand it. They're supposed to be a force of nature. They cannot be reasoned with, they cannot be surrendered to, and you can't run away from them. Sauron is Tolkien's Hitler, and the orcs are his SA, and the Uruk-hai are his SS. They're brutes. They're bipedal crocodiles. But if orcs are worthy of mercy for their transgressions, well then so is Patton Oswalt and all the rest of these Hollywood libertines who have done the most vile, unspeakable things. And as this P. Diddy thing continues to develop, you begin to realize that it's not just wild parties. It's that there's a sexual handshake that goes on inside this inner circle of these wildly successful people. And it's not just limited to these rappers bringing in, groupies. It's going on between each other. This Diddy thing is every single second gets perverted beyond belief. And Cat Williams, who I always kind of liked just because of what he had to say about Michael Jackson, is just dropping these truth bombs on what's happening in Hollywood and how the whole thing is just it's just ball, man. It's Morgoth. It is in fact a temple of evil. And it's not lost on me, by the way, if you haven't seen it from the outside. Many people have seen the Kodak Center where they host the Academy Awards. They've seen the Academy Awards from the inside. But the motifs outside on the corner of Highland and Hollywood Boulevard, architecture, there are bearded bulls, and it's Babylon. And they're not only not ashamed of it, they're celebrating it. You walk into the Kodak Theater from the outside, and you see nothing but Babylonian motif. I don't believe that that's a coincidence, and I don't believe that somebody just innocently did it. I think that was part of the deal when they commissioned it. Yes, this is Babylon. This is the whore goddess. This is Baal. This is sacrificing children. This is sex slavery. This is what Hollywood is. And then finally, my third point is that regarding Patton Oswalt, I said the main driver of this BS is narcissism. Look how morally advanced I am. Unlike you non-famous working class rubes and hicks, I'm able to see nuance because I am of spotless virtue. You see, I can take the side of the orcs because I'm so morally sophisticated that I can see that they've got a case, that they've got a point. And if they don't have a case or a point, I'm the person who's going to make it for them. I'm going to be the great white liberal father who comes down and defends the orcs against all the prejudice that they've had to deal with. It's all a misunderstanding. They just want to live in peace like everybody else. See how good I am. See how unbelievably morally pure I am. Not only am I filled with the milk of human kindness, but I have this omniscient, godlike ability to see what their true motives really are. And they don't have any true motives. They just react to what Aragorn and the elves and the dwarves have done. They're victims of oppression, you see. And anybody with a conscience and a heart and an intellect as vast as mine can see this, while the rest of you homophobic, racist, misogynistic rubes out there are so caught up in your ideas of right and wrong that you can't tell that this is just a misunderstood group of people. So to Patton Oswalt, I say metaphorically, I think you ought to take your message of peace and reconciliation, Patton, and walk out into that orc army that's besieging Helm's Deep under a flag of truce and explain to them that you are our ally and that you are down with the movement and that you are there to advocate for them. And then let's see what happens when you go out there and do that. Let's just see what happens. It's a question I don't get very often. Speaker Steve says, Bill, is your wedding ring tungsten? No, my wedding ring is titanium. It's titanium, so I can't get out of it. I just keep trying. I saw through it, melt through it, slide it off. Nope, it's just plain titanium. I'm stuck with it. I wish I'd gotten something soft like gold or something with a low, maybe lead or something like that. That would have been so much easier. Wow, Speaker Steve says his is carbon fiber. That's awesome, dude. That's strong and lightweight. You don't have to lug this extra pound that I have to, although it makes for a fine welcome gift if you meet somebody outside in a dark alley someplace. So anyway, yeah. So that's basically it. So that's why they want to humanize the orcs. And by the way, if they are so filled with their theory of things that they are willing to try to humanize creatures that are so obviously your enemy that their battle cry is a cry for the taste of man flesh. They're not just coming to defeat you and butcher you. They're not taking prisoners. They're going to kill you and then they're going to eat you. Well, they're not going to kill you first. They're just going to eat you alive. If you are so deep into an ideology that you believe that an army out there that is there to eat you alive is somebody you can go out and reason with because you are so advanced and you're so smart and you're so virtuous, then that shows me that you are so unbelievably disconnected from reality and so deep into your own, well, let's just say deep into your own mind is probably a more appropriate way of putting it. But yeah, you're a theorist. You're like Lenin. You're like Lenin and Hitler. Hitler and Lenin, two fanatics who had this fundamental, unshakable, monomaniacal idea, not just megalomaniacal, but monomaniacal. There's only one thing Hitler ever thought about, and that was gaining power to turn the German people into the masters of the world. There's only one thing Lenin ever thought about, and that was gaining political power to turn the Russian people into the masters of the world. And the reason that they both wanted to turn their people into the masters of the world was because they were the masters of the world. That's why they wanted to do it. And yeah, and like Queers for Palestine and all the rest of these morons, these morons. You can also throw in the all of those spies who were in the one main spy who was actually in the Manhattan Project, and all of the immediate post-war Soviet spies that were infiltrating U.S. and British intelligence and selling atomic secret to the Russians. They're all part of the same crowd. There's no difference between the Russians and the Americans, Well, then let's take a tour of some of the American gulags and some of the American torture chambers that we have below the White House or below the Capitol building. Let's have a look at the torture chambers below the Capitol building. You show me those torture chambers and the people being murdered down there, like they were in the Lubyanka, a couple thousand a night. Show me those bodies, then I'll agree. Yeah, that's definitely give the bomb to the Soviets, because we got nothing but two morally equal, evil empires that are at war with each other, and we can't possibly allow one to triumph because what would they do if they had unlimited power? Well, we've already shown you what we do if we have unlimited power. We don't do anything. You just try and keep the peace as best we can and trade with people. You got something we want to buy? Fantastic. What do you want to sell it for? Not only will we buy it from you, we'll go to the expense to make sure that it gets here safely. Just so bloody tired of these anti-Western, anti-human, anti-progress progressives. They're just plain libertines, and the reason that they hate regular people so much is because regular people try to behave themselves. They don't succeed every time. Thank you, Lapco92. I got another list of super chats I need to catch up on. Power, unlimited power, yeah. Want to tell people what to do. They just want to tell people what to do. And nobody's buying it, man. Nobody's buying it. Can anybody name a movie that came out that was somewhat original by relatively progressive people? I wouldn't call Jordan Peele, he's certainly a liberal. There's no question he's a liberal. But I haven't seen, the only movie of his I saw was of his that I actually liked, Nope. Some people hated Nope, and some people hated the alien, the creature in Nope, but I thought it was absolutely original. Never, ever seen anything like it. But Jordan Peele creates original content as a really original Alien. I mean, really, just left me, mouth open in disbelief. But that movie wasn't a beating on what you're supposed to believe. It wasn't a message movie. It didn't. It wasn't telling me what I needed to do. In terms of my politics. He's a talented filmmaker. I also, by the way, this will make a number of people happy, Eric Blake especially, to switch gears here a little bit. Was it last night? I think it was last night. No, it was the night before last. Night before last, I finally got a chance to watch Godzilla Minus One. I would have watched it earlier, but when I saw the trailer for it on, was it Netflix or Amazon Prime? I don't remember which. When I saw the little trailer that ran, it was dubbed, and I thought, I hate watching dubbed movies. I don't want to watch it dubbed, and I thought, well, I'll watch it dubbed. I've heard it was really good. And the second I got it rolling, I said, wait a minute, is it dubbed or do I have the choice? So I found out, no, I can have it played in Japanese with subtitles. I much prefer. I can't watch dubbed movies. I really can't. I watched two movies that I liked a lot since we were here last. I watched Godzilla Minus One, and I watched a Norwegian film called Atlantic Convoy. Listened to that in the original Norwegian with the so I read a couple of good movies lately. I'll start with the simpler one first. Atlantic Convoy is just a real straightforward historical telling of the merchant marine shipping between the United States getting supplies to the Soviet Union. And it is the tale of one, apparently the only convoy ever, where they got most of the way towards Murmansk, and then the British thought that there was a German surface battle group, that German pocket battleships, the battle cruisers, had gotten out. Or maybe even, no, Bismarck had already been sunk by then, but probably Prince Eugen and its sister ship. They thought commerce raiders were on the way. So historically what happened was, I think it was 1942, they had this Atlantic convoy with 40 ships on the way, and they took a couple of losses due to U-boats, but somewhere after Iceland, the British just withdrew their convoy protection, told the convoys to scatter, and something like 36 ships set out, and something like 11 arrived. But this was the story of just one of the small little tramp steamer, and it was a Norwegian movie, and I really, really liked it. It really had a lot of depth to it. Really original characters. Some of them were brave. Some of them were cowards. Some of them were cowards who had moments of courage. There was tragedy. There was a woman on board who was the radio operator, who I thought was terrific. She didn't go diving and pull the pin on the, on the charging lever on the one anti-aircraft gun they had with her teeth as she somersaults through the air. She was just competent, capable, the most sensible-minded person on ship, probably, or at least next to the captain anyway. Honest, integrity, well-acted, terrific character. Had no problem with that at all. She, like I said, she didn't push some guy out of the way and leap into the anti-aircraft guns. And she was a radio operator. She was a damn good radio operator. And it was a compelling story, and it had me gripped the whole way through. It's called Atlantic Convoy. I think it was 2023, and it was a Norwegian film. It was very, very self-critical of Norway during the war, because Norway, as you know, fell to the Germans, and the government retired to Great Britain. Norway had installed a governor named Quisling, who became an adjective. If you were a Quisling, you were a traitor who sold out your own people. And so Norway's as they said in the movie, at the end of the movie, Norway's greatest contribution to the Allied victory was its merchant marine uh, uh, service. And it was damn dangerous stuff, and it was a great film. Highly recommend it. And I love Norway. I've been to Norway, and I thought Norway was a fantastic country. I love the Norwegians. I love Norway. I could see myself living in Norway if the United States were to evaporate, but this country's not evaporating, so I'm not going anywhere. But it was. I would like to go back and spend more time in Norway. I just loved the people, and I loved it spotlessly clean. Um, And since we're talking, if I can remember to come back to it, I will. If somebody can remind me to come back to SpaceX after I talk about the other one. Godzilla Minus One was one of the best movies I've ever seen, ever. There are like high movies, and for me, when I think about movies I like, there are like high movies, and then there are popular movies. And it's a different kind of an enjoyment, you know? My favorite movie of all time is Aliens. Aliens is not the greatest movie ever made, but it's my favorite movie. Um, I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is a perfect movie. I think Godzilla Minus One a, I think it's a perfect movie. It's very nearly a perfect movie. Um, it's about a kamikaze pilot who chickens out. He comes back to base claiming mechanical problems. There are no mechanical problems. He survives. He's a kamikaze pilot during the very final days of the war. He survives the war, comes back to a ruined Japan. It was very moving to me to see just how devastated Tokyo was and how long it took for them to get. Because you, oh well, you devastated in 1945, but by the early 50s they'd recovered nicely, you know. And it's like, that's 5 years, Jack. And it was great seeing how their living quarters improved just incrementally over the course of 4 or 5 years. But this whole movie is about this guy carrying this shame around. Uh, he was an interesting character. He had a lot of depth. The premise of making the movie about a kamikaze pilot who chickened out is really clever. Um, uh, and um, and the special effects are beyond belief. They won an Academy Award for special effects. I think the total movie budget was $8 million. I've never seen better special effects. The only thing that's ever come close to it was District 9 in terms of believability. It was, they didn't go over the top with it. Hollywood has the ability to make tremendous special effects, but they always have to add this over-the-top stuff where the plane is zooming right by the lens. No, they kept it under control, and I knew that Godzilla had a breathful of atomic fire, which basically made him a flame-throwing dragon prior to this movie. But in this movie, when he lets go with that atomic fire, it shoots a bolt out that's as wide as a football field, flattens, just creates a tunnel of destruction, and when it gets to its destination, there's a gigantic, huge frickin' A-bomb out there. And it's like, holy cow, man. The guy who played the scientist was terrific. The Japanese in that movie, the dialogue was very critical, self-critical of Japan. There's a line where they're saying, well, the Japanese need to inform the government needs to inform the people that Godzilla's out there and it's heading for Tokyo. It's like, no, the government doesn't want to alarm people. And one of the characters' line says, yes, well, control of information from the people is a Japanese specialty. The movie sets you up to believe that it's all going to be about a kamikaze sacrifice, but the movie there's a very, very well written speech where one of the characters says, we just got out of a war where we valued life so cheaply that we were willing to send people off to certain death. He said, the goal of this mission is not to die gloriously defeating Godzilla. The goal of this mission is to kill Godzilla and have everybody come home again. I was practically crying at that. I thought that was so deep and so honest and courageous the way they criticized their own government during the war. they had to find a way to write America out of the war, because the entire point of the movie was that Japan had nothing in the years after World War II. They were reduced to rubble. If you've got this gigantic monster that's coming out of the ocean, then the obvious answer is the United States Navy. But they said, look, they can't have U.S. naval operations on this level because tensions with the Soviets are very high, and you don't want to be a hair trigger. The Japanese are going to have to take care of it itself. It all happened in a relatively short frame of time. I said, yeah, I'm in. That's good enough for me. I'll buy it. Fair enough. But they didn't dump on America. They didn't. They had nothing bad to say about America. A couple of nice things to say about America, and I was just completely blown away by it. I thought it was a fantastic film, and they gave you a special treat at the very end of the movie that I was actually thinking, I don't know. I think you're really. I don't know if that was necessary. I actually think that kind of last second turnaround redemption for a happy ending was a little bit. I would have left it out. But on the other hand, I thought, no, you're giving the audience what they want. You're making people go home happy, and that's good enough for me. I thought it was fantastic. I thought the movie was very well thought out in terms of not being lazy. Like, how are we going to destroy this thing? And they just, I'm sorry about all the spoilers, but I mean, it's like they shot it with a out of commission Japanese cruiser that had been in Shanghai when the war ended. So they got permission to sail that thing back, which was cool. It must have been, there was a moment there, I could feel it, how the Japanese people, the Japanese audience must have really stood up and cheered, because it was a Japanese warship coming back to shoot at Godzilla. It was a lot like Thunderchild in War of the Worlds, where these tripods are just going everywhere and just killing everything. And in the book, there's a British warship called Thunderchild. It takes down 2 of these tripods, and it's like, oh, Royal Navy, hurrah! So that was great. But they decided their design on how to kill it was so clever. I almost kind of wish that it had worked. They had to have it not work or at least weaken him enough so that you could wrap up your main storyline, which I'll spare you that spoiler. But it was fantastic. It was a tremendous movie. It goes to show you what you can do for $8 million when people care. It wasn't, I almost said it wasn't a remake, but on some level it really, it was a remake of the original Godzilla. The decision to place this in 1947 or 48 or whatever it was genius. Genius, because if you make a Godzilla movie in 2023 or 24, it's just like, pop a nuke. I don't care how able this thing is to regenerate. It's not going to be able to regenerate itself past 4 million degrees. Nuke it. And they didn't have to go through that. The acting was superb. Every single character was well written. The supporting characters were well written. They were beautifully acted. It was just a magnificent pop movie. One of the best films I've ever seen in terms of just in terms of a fun movie. It's not a high movie, but and there's nothing wrong with not being a high movie, As a movie as opposed to cinema, it's in my top 3. I thought it was absolutely, utterly brilliant. And that brings me back to what I wanted to say about SpaceX. You see all this. I know we have people out there with their shot glasses lined up, but there's been a great deal of deterioration and corrosion of American public standards. Our education system is really way below what it used to be, and far below what it should be or could be. although, as I mentioned, I went to this football game, and I was real impressed by the kids that were coming up. Let's see how their grades are. But when they caught that booster, what I wanted to say to the rest of the world was, see, we're the only people that can do this. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to crow loud, and I'm not trying to say USA number one. That's not where I'm going with this. What I wanted to basically say to the rest of the world, Europeans especially, was to say, when you see all of the fat people on the porch yelling and screaming about this and that, and when you see the arrest videos and the people temper tantrums and the gun violence and the racial thing, and when you see all of this stuff about America, what you need to understand about America is you're seeing the worst of it. That's not what life in America is like for most people. You're seeing the worst of it. And it's a very, very slim slice of the American pie. But the way to think about all of that stuff, all of the car chases and the police and all of this stuff that people see in America and hate. I don't know if it's safe to come to America. So you want to go to Des Moines, Iowa, you'd be perfectly safe there. What I wanted to say about that is that is the waste heat that comes off of being able to catch rockets out of air with chopsticks. That's just the waste heat that's generated. It is an extremely dynamic society with a great deal of freedom and a great deal of energy. And when you have freedom and energy, you allow people to go their own way and do what they want to do. And one end of that gigantic bell curve is a 400-pound person getting pulled over for speeding and then, fighting with the police and then getting tased. And the other end of that bell curve is grabbing a rocket out of the air that's been coming down at Mach 4 and it's coming down so hot that its engines are glowing red from friction, and just grabbing that baby out of the sky. Now, you don't have to like America, but you have to understand that you don't get one without the other. You can't get the SpaceX without the freedom. You can't have the freedom of SpaceX and not expect that the freedom that allows us to do things like what SpaceX has done is not going to show itself in negative ways at the other end of the bell curve. America, everything about America is turned up to 11. And I think I had that thought when I was watching the Norwegian movie. Because Norway is an extraordinarily well-ordered society. And in many ways is a kind of paradise. I mean, when I was there, I didn't see a single overweight person. Everything was spotless. The train was not only spotless, it was quiet. All of the seats were, there was nobody written anything on the walls, and there were no holes in the upholstery. It was exactly on time, There were no union guys arguing about this. I see this, in Shanghai or in Japan or wherever they're unloading goods, and they've got all these automated things. We did a right angle on this, and we don't have the union stuff that we have here. There's just, this society of ours generates a lot of waste heat because it generates a lot of energy. You don't have as much waste heat in Norway because the reactor of Norway is tuned to a much, much lower level. You don't have that degree of civil breakdown and that degree of chaotic disorder, but you also don't have SpaceX, Tesla, Google, Facebook, the internet, airplanes. You just don't have it. They're not manufacturing Mach 10 aircraft in Norway. They're not inventing the MRI machine in Norway. They're not, and I don't mean to pick on Norway. On the contrary, I'd much rather pick on Sweden, to be perfectly honest with you, because I told a joke that I thought every single Norwegian in the entire world was told at birth. I told this at a small group of people at dinner, and they didn't know. I was astonished. I was sitting there with these Norwegians. We were talking a little bit about politics and about some of these things, and I said, "So this so this joke about Norwegians is true then. And they said, what joke is that? I said, what does Sweden have that Norway doesn't have? And they said, what? And I said, good neighbor. And they about fell out of their chair. So there's that. And there's a space channel. Scott Manley's the go-to guy on space stuff. Manley's he's fantastic. He's just really, really, really knows his stuff. But I found myself watching a channel called What About It with a guy named Felix, and Felix reminds me of Jack Horkheimer, especially since I saw him live during the. I saw him doing a live stream. He started hours before the launch. Watching him live, I got to see who Felix really is. So Felix does an on-camera personality when he does his What's It About broadcasts. And for my taste, it's just way too campy. I think I am not going to tell Felix how to run his channel. He just crossed 500,000 subscribers, and he earned it. And he was tearfully happy about it, and it made me happy to see him have that kind of success. If it were me, I would tone it down a little bit, because he seems to be too campy for me. He's German, and I liked him a lot better when he was just being himself. But then again, he's got 500,000 subscribers, and they're all new subscribers. I've got 198,000, and they've been there for 12 years. I don't know how much of that number is real anymore, or what it means even anymore. But I like him. I like him a lot. I just find that it's a little over the top for me. But again, he's succeeding in a level I'm not. I mean, his videos are getting hundreds of thousands of views. So I wish him the very best. I just think he's better when he's a little less coked up. You know, I'm not suggesting he's really coked up. It just comes off a little bit too intense. That's just me. But me with a cardboard Shatner and Gorn behind him lecturing on campy. Well, as I pointed out, there's a reason that there's a cardboard Shatner, and Shatner represents reason, foresight, discipline, control. He represents, in this little tableau I have here, this is the triumph of Western thinking over Eastern savagery. This is the difference between lashing together a bunch of bamboo sticks versus, even though he's lashing a bamboo stick over here, this is them building the bridge over the River Kwai in their head and having blueprints and everything else. This is keeping your. This is an unrelenting, unthinking mass human wave attack, and this is keeping your head, keeping your powder dry, holding your fire. Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. It's crystal clear to me. This is the moment in television where you see the superiority of Western thought. This is the thunderstick versus the horde. And so I have exactly this tableau here, and I like the way it's arranged. Plus, it's nice framing for my way too wide headrest there. And also got Dave in the background looking at this whole thing, going. Dave's expression back there is he's looking at this tableau and he's going, "My God, this Captain Kirk's a genius." Got to figure out where to put Anduril in the shot. I could probably put it behind Kirk on that wall there. I think I got to clear that wall out. So anyway, yeah, our numbers are up. Our viewing numbers are up, and I'm gonna keep them up. I told you I wouldn't tell you this, but I'm planning on doing something manageable. This business of doing hot mics is kind of like mini firewalls, is kind of antithetical to the whole idea of that. That's really what Things to Come is for. And I can't do Things to Come until I know the outcome of selection. It's just going to determine the first episode. going to be a hard landing or soft landing. So my plan is to start by doing hot mics at least on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'm going to try and do them every day if I can. I'm going to do them as often as I can. Let's put it that way. So I will got my right angles tomorrow at 10:30. I'm going to try and come in before then and crank one out. It's important for them to get, if I'm going to get them up quickly, and certainly if I'm going to get them up daily, they have to have very little post-production elements in them. Even the one on the one I did yesterday for the Starship Heavy catch, that launched at about 5:30 my time. I watched it at home until the booster catch happened, and then there was about a half-hour period until Starship made its re-entry. I used that time to drive to the studio, sat here, watched the Starship land here, and then just went in and recorded it. So that would have been, let's see, 6:30. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning, I think, about 7 a.m. when I recorded it, and I was here till 11. Doing the post-production on it, so that's 4 hours, and I need to make it much briefer than that. Ideally, I mean, it didn't really need my commentary, but the visuals were so spectacular that it needed to be there. I mean, it didn't need my commentary. Presumably, it needed my commentary, but I didn't need to put the. But it just had to show it. I just had to. It just was. Just too amazing to see. But a lot of people said this is the commentary we want to see and that we missed, so I'm going to go back to that. And I also have come to realize that the real product we should be selling here is not even insight. It really is hope. I can't sell false hope, and I don't have false hope anymore. I find myself. I don't know how to say this without having half the people on the channel just jump off. But if it turns out that Kamala Harris wins this election, I'm not going to say I'll be okay with that. But you're not going to hear me saying that's the end of the country, because I have come to believe in the last year or two that you can't kill this country. That it's too important, and it's too well built. You know what this country is? This is what it's like. This country is like the Starship. When not on Flight 5, there were some problems on Flight 5, so we did some redesigns, and those problems are probably going on Flight 6. But what I'm reminded of, I think, with this country is the Flight 4 Starship, where you saw that flap just burning away. I mean, it's just burning away. It's clearly destroying the structure of the vehicle. You just watch it, just globs coming off, and finally the camera couldn't even see anything through the camera because so many globs of metal had come off. And any moment I was expecting that fin just to come off, but it didn't. It didn't come off. Even though it took unbelievable damage, the thing was able to do the belly flop maneuver, and it landed in the ocean the way it was supposed to. That's Flight 4, not Flight 5. Flight 5 took some more damage on those leading fins, but less. And this time they put it right down next to these buoys that they had anchored out there. That surprised me. That really surprised me, because I thought, oh, what a shame, they're going to be landing in pitch black. You're not going to see anything. And sure enough, you didn't see anything until they lit the rocket motor engine. And then I thought, oh, so I saw some water. But then when they showed the buoy and it's floating there like that, it looked like a merchantman that had just been torpedoed. And I sat there and I just thought, these guys just nailed it. My point here is that Starship is so well engineered that it has a lot of damage tolerance built into it. It's so well engineered that it can take a lot of damage and still do the mission. That's how I feel about the country. I even feel that way about the government. One second, is at the end of the my episode, you no longer have a "that's impossible" attitude. Does that apply to flying cars? Look, Eric, I don't think flying cars are impossible. I've never thought flying cars were impossible. We have flying cars today. I don't think flying cars are impossible. I just think they're unreasonable. I don't see any reason for them, for the reasons that I've stated so many times before. You think. Just let me just answer this. Just stay with me on the logic of this, okay? The kind of flying cars that we're talking about is an automobile that you have to drive to an airport, put the wings on, or have the wings unfold. I've seen them unfold. It's very impressive. But you still have to have a runway, and you still have to take off, and you still fly your car now from A to B, and you have to have a runway to land on. Then you fold the wings back up again, and you get back into traffic, okay? What does that get you? What makes a good airplane is lightweight. What makes a good car is heavyweight and a low center of gravity. An airplane that is on the road makes a miserable car, and a car that's in the air makes a miserable airplane. But here's my bigger point. If you're talking about a flying car where you can be in traffic and you get to a traffic jam and all of a sudden you just push a button, you just go up like the Jetsons or like in a flying saucer and fly along, then why would you be in traffic in the first place? If you're talking about point-to-point vertical takeoff and landing transportation, like I'm not talking about the Jetsons TV show, like the Jetsons quad rotor, I'm the first person in line to buy that, but that's not a car. It's not a car. When people talk about flying cars, they're talking about things that they can drive and then they turn into airplanes. If you're talking about me hopping into one of those quad rotor Jetsons, head down to the grocery, something with a cabin on it or something, hop down to the grocery store, throw some stuff in the trunk, up and out, fine. I'm fine with that. And I understand that my main concerns, which would be I'm a good pilot, but I've seen some bad drivers, and I don't want those bad drivers in the air. It's one thing to have somebody come around a corner too fast and hit your car. That's an annoyance. Somebody comes around a pattern too fast and hits your airplane. That's lights out. So if they get to the point where they're automatic, where they're flying themselves and they're talking to each other and so on, then that's a mode of transportation, and it's cool, but it's not. But that's not flying. That's passengering. Look, to say that I'm against. Look, I'm still waiting for my jetpack, man. I'm still waiting for my jetpack, but when I started thinking about, I wanted a flying car before you were born. I was expecting a flying car by the time you were 5, and it was a long time before I realized that the concept of the desire for a flying car for me was always, I'd love to be in my bitchin' Camaro. Oh, wait a minute. Look, here's traffic. I'm just going to go up and over this and land in my backyard. Well, first of all, if I can land in my backyard, I'm not going to go on the freeway. I'm not going to be in a car. I'm going to be in an air vehicle. And the compromises you have to make it a good air vehicle, make it a miserable car. I'd rather have a good car and a good airplane, or a good helicopter, or a good quadrotor, or a good whatever. My problem with quadrotors is that what's the failure mode? Now, when you've got eight rotors, two, and two, if you told me that you could lose one motor and the other motor would be able to provide enough thrust to get you to the ground safely, then I'd seriously think about flying that. I know that the Jetson, which I think is super cool, I've never seen the Jetson much more than 20 feet in the air, and that's fine with me too. But that's clearly limited by software. It's not a ground effect vehicle. For those of you unfamiliar with the term ground effect vehicle, a hovercraft is a form of a ground effect vehicle. There are other slightly more exotic forms of ground effect vehicles, but a ground effect vehicle, there's a aerodynamic effect called ground effect. And basically what it is, and this is true for airplanes, any airplane. Take a glider, for example. You get a glide ratio of whatever you get. When you get down to the ground, and it's generally about a wingspan and a half, somewhere around in there, what happens is the air is being compressed by the wing. The air is displacing air. The wing is displacing air down as you're in the air, But when you come into land or when you're taking off, the distance between the wing and the ground is such that air is actually being compressed. It's denser. So you get more lift as you get close to the ground. This is called ground effect. And a hovercraft is able to basically take a skirt, a rubber skirt, and just generate air downward. And the air leaking out from the bottom means that you can get up a little bit of height, but you can't take a hovercraft straight up into the air the way you can take a helicopter. It's a ground effect vehicle. It's able to lift itself off the ground some distance, and that's cool. They're a bitch to stop. Once you get that mass going, you can't just put on the brakes. You got to reverse the thing. So the Jetson looks like a lot of fun as a recreational vehicle. A lot of fun. I can see myself flying that thing down riverways and so on. But any pilot who would like to live a long time has to ask himself this very important question, and that is, look, I am confident of my ability. I'm highly confident of my ability to not fly into something while I have control of the vehicle. Like, I've got so many super chats to go back on. But I am careful enough to believe that I can fly. If I did not, let me rephrase this. If I was flying an airplane that was designed 400 years in the future or whatever, and was incapable of mechanical failure, then I could fly much, much, much more daringly than I do now, because I'm convinced that I could fly an airplane like that in such a way that I would not hit the ground or a tree or a mountainside. But we don't live in that world, so I have to be much more careful than that. Let's take my Sky Arrow, that little light airplane that I had before the Long Easy. The Long Easy is not an airplane I would ever fly low, because Long Easy needs a fair amount of room to stop. But the Sky Arrow, just imagine a Piper Cub. It's a 21st century Piper Cub. It's made out of carbon fiber. It's got a canopy. It's a cool looking airplane. Really cool looking airplane. So the Sky Arrow stalls at 40 knots. That's 48 miles an hour, maybe, something like that. You sit in the front of that airplane and your knees are in front of you and your legs are in front of you, and there's not a whole lot of nose to crush there. So I'm not saying that I would want to run a Sky Arrow into the side of a brick wall at 40 knots, but I am saying it wouldn't kill me. It'd break both my legs, but it wouldn't kill me. And that's the worst case scenario. So the Sky Arrow stalls at such a low speed. It's got a very, very, very highly cambered wing. It's got a very curvy wing. That means it generates a lot of lift at low speed, but it also means it can't go very fast because the induced drag just builds up. So its top cruising speed on the Sky Arrow, it's probably about 80 knots, 85 knots, which is pushing 100 miles an hour. It's not fast for an airplane. And when you're flying into a 30-knot headwind, you're doing 45, 50 miles an hour over the ground. And when I was flying through, what is that pass? Come on. It slipped out of my mind. It'll come back in a second. There's a pass between, is it El Cajon? Yeah, I guess it's El Cajon. The pass between that separates Riverside and the Inland Empire from Palm Springs. El Cajon Pass. It is El Cajon. Thanks, Dave. I was coming back, so all of the wind is coming ashore, right across the whole LA, the whole Pacific front of LA. The wind is coming from the ocean, and it goes over the flat part of LA, and then there are the Santa Monica Mountains and the San Joaquin Mountains, all these other mountains, and they all channel everything into El Cajon Pass, which is only a couple miles wide. That's where all the thousands and thousands of windmills are. It's a giant venturi. It collects all of the air for hundreds of miles and forces it through this little spot, because otherwise it has to go up and over, and it's easier to go through this. So you get strong winds through El Cajon Pass. That's why they put so many windmills in there. And I was flying an airplane that flies at 80 knots coming through El Cajon Pass, and I was flying into a 65 knot headwind, which means I was doing 20 miles an hour over the ground. I practically walked that fast. And it took me an hour and a half to get through El Cajon Pass into that headwind, which was frustrating but also hilarious. For those of you who haven't heard the story, I was talking to air traffic control on the way through because Palm Springs Airport is over there, and it's just good to get flight following through there. Well, it's not just good, it's required. Because very narrow little space, a lot of airplanes going through there. So I was coming through El Cajon Pass into the headwind on one particular day when it was really windy. And I was talking to the controller for nearly 2 hours. And just as I was finally getting out of his radar coverage area, he says, "All right, well, 4 Sierra Alpha, it's been great talking to you. Have a good flight home." I said, "Thanks for all the help. When are you back on duty next?" He says, "I'll be back tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. I said, "I'll probably still be here." He got a big laugh out of that. So when he first identified, this is an old joke. This is a joke that's applied to every slow airplane. I certainly didn't come up with this myself. But it's true for the Sky Arrow. He says, say your aircraft code. It's a Sierra Kilo Alpha Romeo. He says, "What is that?" I said, "It's a Sky Arrow." I said, "Did a light sport?" I said, "No, it's certified. It's a pusher twin. 80 horsepower. We generally get about 85 knots out of it. It's one of the few aircraft that are certified to survive a bird strike from the rear." It's one of my favorite lines ever. So anyway, yeah, let's go to the questions, shall we? Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, it took a bird strike from the rear. It was a seagull. It was going considerably faster than me, and it just ran right into the back of my rudder. You can do this, Bill. You can do it. You got this, Bill. You can find your website. You can do it. Bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-da-da-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-da-da-dum. You know what? While this is loading, I need to go back and get all of these super chats because I missed a bunch of them. Oh, what type of pilot license do I have? I have a private pilot's license with an instrument rating and a glider rating. When I took the private pilot's license, I should have listened to my flight instructor. He said, you immediately need to go down and pass your commercial pilot's written test because you just flew your. It wasn't my flight instructor. It was my examiner. After I flew the flight test for the private pilot's license, the FAA examiner said to me, "If I were you, I would study like hell right now, get your commercial written test passed, because you just flew the private test to commercial standards. You could just knock that off like that." And I said, "I'll get on it right away." I don't really need a commercial license. It's a difference between having a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. It just sounds better. But anyway, all right, let me do these super chats here. We've got our questions teed up. Thank you, Eric, for curating the questions, but I've got a bunch of these to knock down, so let me scroll to the very top here and see if I can get them one by one. Okay, we got a Joseph J. Looks like Kozenzale. Excuse me if I got that wrong, Joseph. "Thanks for all that you do, Bill, and I can't wait for the next What We Saw series. Also, could you please describe deeper how you went from a Mondale voter to a conservative? I'm interested." That's probably a story for Thursday night, Joseph, but I can give you this. I voted for Mondale as the first vote I ever cast for two reasons. I was a theater major. When I was a liberal I was never a America-hating liberal. I always loved this country. Always loved this country. Wanted to fight for this country. Was set to go to the Air Force Academy at 17. Failed division tests. So I was never one of the America's a bunch of warmongers. Well, if we were, I wanted to be one of them. And I was never anti-business. When everybody else was talking about making movies, they were always talking about getting grants. And I said, no, grants are ridiculous. They have to beg for money. They have control over what you do. We need to go find investors. We need to find a way to monetize these things so we can get investors. So this was me when I was at my most liberal, surrounded by all of these theater students who were also very liberal because they're actors. And actors are people that pursue fantasy careers, which is fun and exciting and glamorous and interesting as hell. And I loved it, and I still love it. But it's not exactly where you go for rock rib common sense opinions. So the short answer to your question is, I passionately believed in things I knew nothing about, and over time I just let the evidence convince me that the entire theory was wrong. It wasn't like a road to Damascus moment. It was a series of small things. I remember having the opinion that, really saying this out loud, I'm a privileged white kid, and I'm saying this in 1970 or 80, so I'm well ahead of the curve on this. I'm a white kid, and I come from a middle-class background, and I've got a TV set, and if some poor black kid breaks into my student apartment, steals my TV set, that's only because he can't afford one and I can, And then, I don't know, 4 months after that, something like that, I'm lying there in bed asleep, dreaming my sweet little dreams, and all of a sudden I hear this sound, and I turn my head, and about 12 inches from my nose, there was a young black man coming through my window to take my TV set. It's almost like it was scripted. It's like God said, I wrote it down, so here's your example. So we both got pretty scared, and he ran the hell out of there, and I remember at first being like, well, that's not a fun way to wake up. And then I remember being very, very, very angry. And then my angry self confronted my idiot self. And the two had a conversation. The conversation went something like this. Well, you said you said it's perfectly okay if some disadvantaged black guy comes into your apartment, steal your TV because you're a white kid from a middle-class apartment and he's not, so there's your opportunity. Why didn't you just, instead of just getting up, why didn't you say, hey, wait, come back, and hand it to him? And then the angry part of myself said, this guy didn't know if I was in there, didn't know if I was armed or not. I don't know if he was armed or not. He might have knifed me. He might have done any number of things. Might have gotten into a fight. He might have knocked my teeth in. Who knows? Who knows what would have happened? And furthermore, this wasn't John Amos, coming in to steal a TV set so that he could give bread to his starving family. This guy came to take the TV set because he wanted a drug hit. And it's not even my TV set, it's my dad's TV set. And it was little things like that over the course of time when I began to realize, no, this whole thing is just feel-good fantasy. It's designed to make you feel good about yourself, but it's bullshit. It's not true. He's not in here to feed his family. He's not starving. He's not incapable of getting a job. I worked as a security guard. I've been a waiter. I've been a limousine driver. I have been in the service industry. I have been 40 years old, carrying 3 suitcases that belonged to 24-year-old executives, and I didn't find anything demeaning about that. I was working a limousine job because I liked writing, and I could write between rides, and it gave me a chance to see the city. I was completely blown away that I was in Los Angeles, and being on the road in Los Angeles when I was either between trips or heading on one way to pick up somebody or something. I'm listening to KROQ, Rock of the 80s in 1988. I'm listening to 80s music. I'm in Los frickin' Angeles. I've got these movies that I'm working on. I didn't consider it to be beneath me to be saying, good morning, sir, how are you? Can I help you with that? That's just never entered my head that I should be, that was work that I couldn't possibly do. And I thought, well, if I can do that kind of work, then why can't other people do that kind of work? It didn't take a super long time because it wasn't very deep in me. My dad was a Republican. I always loved this country. I was always on the side of hard work and management. I never had that poison just, pumped into my brain. So that's the short form. Maybe as short as it's ever been, too. I actually need to go to the doctor. I think I have to get the results of that ultrasound on my adrenal glands. Feeling a little swollen in there. Okay. Thank you very much for that, by the way, the kind words. I appreciate that very much. And the super chat as well, obviously. Justin Cameron for $10. Loved your video on the super heavy catch. Everything about it, down to the pauses between statements, was poignant. Well, thank you. I'm still trying to figure out what that show was going to be. I kind of want, on some part of me wants to say, well, you should put more care into it and write it more, but that means it's less likely to get done. And generally, the whole idea of a hot mic is it being a hot take. I did one pull-up in there. I made one cut. The whole thing is essentially one uninterrupted cut. I pulled up one stutter where I got that. So thank you, though. I thought I was very happy with it, and I think the optimism thing is, like I said, it's not forced and it's not a strategy. It's not a business tactic. I'm just feeling much more optimistic than I did in 2020. Probably because I've seen how much damage they've done, and then I realized nobody's still buying this stuff. Nobody wants this stuff. They're all just a bunch of incompetent D-bags, and we're going to kick their asses. So we're going to kick their asses. I remember when I had the moment that turned me from being like, oh, God, the fourth turning in this idea of cyclical history is a big part of it. But the lightning bolt moment was when I realized the government is not the country. That everything they're doing is doing to the government. It's not the country. We're supposed to, race relations and Black Lives Matter and reparations and all the rest of it. And I get in an elevator and some black guy holds a door for me. I hold a door for a black guy or a black woman or a Hispanic person at 7-Eleven. They say thank you. This is in Los Angeles, man. And back in America, it's even better. So no. This thing is too well built. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. It's not that they're not doing damage. They're doing incredible damage. They do incredible damage, but it's too well built. We'll just repair the damage, and we'll make minor changes to the design to make sure that particular damage doesn't happen again. Then we'll have some new kind of damages we'll have to go out and deal with. So there you go. Thank you for the super chat very much. Justin Cameron for a super chat here. And I think did I miss one? Somebody asked me what is the next What We Saw series, or they're looking for the next What We Saw series. I have pitched them the Navy, and they've said they liked it, and they've taken it upstairs, and the people upstairs like it. I just would like to have been working on it. We've been doing them more or less one a year, and I really should have been working on this for a couple months now. So I made a phone call and called Jeremy and said, hey, is there any way we can expedite this? Because I've got this thing outlined already. I'm ready to go on this. I want to deliver this thing. I was going to call it the Navy in the Pacific, but I just like the sound of the Navy better. And I'll probably do one episode on the revolution in 1812. I'll probably do one episode that'll get us up to World War II. Most of it'll be World War II, and then I'll probably do maybe 2 episodes after World War II. But at least 5 episodes of World War II. I was talking earlier about the who was I talking to? No, it might have been Shelley. Election betting odds says that, and again, just as a representative for how I feel the pop culture, I talk about this site so often, I don't want you to think that it's a religious experience for me. I don't have a mystical belief in it. I just find it to be a useful weather vane. But if we're ahead to win the presidency, we're ahead to win the Senate. We are down to win the House. The House is 55-45 Democrat as it stands right now. I don't believe that's going to happen. I think that the House is designed to be the fast reactor, and I think people's disgust with inflation and all the rest of it, I think we'll win the House too. But I was thinking about a scenario very quickly where it's like, what happens if we win the presidency, the Senate, and we have the Supreme Court, but we don't have the House? Well, if we had all four, we would have not four, we'd have 2 years to fix everything if we had the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And I've never considered the courts in that trio, but I have been lately. And right now, if we have the House, the Senate, the presidency, and the courts, then we have 2 calendar years to not only fix everything, but to fix it in such a way that it can't be broken the same way again. But what I did realize is the one that seems to be most in doubt is the House. So let's just say, for the sake of it, we had the presidency, we had the Senate, and we had the courts. Virtually all of the damage that has been done has not been done as a result of legislation. The weaponization of the government is an executive branch issue. You simply get rid of everybody in the FBI. Not the field agents, a lot of those can stay, but you take a close look at all of them. And you just simply, you simply, I think executive orders are the death of the republic. But I'm no longer at the point where I'm saying we have to play on a level above these people. They've done so much damage over so much time. I think Donald Trump gets elected. I think the first thing he does after he sits down from his inaugural speech is write an executive order that says all executive orders enacted by Barack Obama and Joe Biden are hereby automatically invalid. And I'm going to take a look at some of the others too. Okay, that sounds good. We'll do that. And then I fire the directors and the middle management. I go all the way down to the field agents. I don't touch the field agents. I look at them one by one. But I would fire everybody in the FBI. I'd fire everybody in the CIA. I'd fire everybody in the FAA. I would make sure that the person who takes over the FAA was a pilot, a working pilot, because the FAA is supposed to advance aviation, not advance bureaucracies. And I would then go down the list and do all of the agencies that way. I would not put anybody in position in charge of an agency or his deputy who was not. I wouldn't put anybody other than a farmer in as the director of the Department of Agriculture. If the Department of Agriculture, if there has to be a Department of Agriculture until we can get rid of a Department of Agriculture, then the Secretary of Agriculture has to be a farmer, and the Secretary of Defense has to be a former warrior, and the Secretary of the Treasury has to be an accountant, and the Secretary of the and you get the idea by now, right? Energy Secretary has to be an engineer. Period. And I don't think that I would appoint an ambassador to any country if that person had not previously lived in that country prior to being ambassador. I think that's a very sound way to you've got, what, 200 countries or something out there. But I think that's perfectly sound. I want to be ambassador to Great Britain. Fantastic. Did you ever live in Great Britain? No, I never did. Well, then you're off the table. I want people who lived in Great Britain before they were ambassadors to be ambassadors to Great Britain. And I want somebody to be the ambassador to Great Britain, somebody who's lived in Great Britain, and somebody who likes Great Britain. Likewise, I want the ambassador to China to have been somebody who's lived in China. Ideally, somebody who's lived in China and speaks Chinese. Somebody who knows what the hell's going on over there. So we're all on the same page. And Fiery Texas says the Ministry of Facility Walk should be held by John Cleese. Well, I think that seems reasonable. I don't know how else we could possibly do it. Back to the Super Chats. Latco92 for a 123 Super Chat, so we get to 123. I might be able to do that over the... I'm going to be in here more this week than I was last week. I might be able to play that while I'm doing something else. It's not that I won't give it my undivided attention. Maybe I can watch it while I'm rendering stuff or something. So I haven't forgotten it. It's still there. The entire table needs an archaeological expedition, which I'm planning on starting tomorrow. This desk is insane. Lapco92 again for a super chat. Knew you'd love it, talking about being stomped down and the people in the country. The effects are astounding, talking about Godzilla Minus One. I saw it in the theater by chance. I hadn't heard of it. I love that movie. I love it too. I think it's absolutely terrific movie. Really, and it deserves so much. And most importantly, it shows what you can do with $8 million. And that's a huge movie. That's not a small movie. The effects of that are huge. That's what happens when you have talented people who care, not who are getting paid by the hour. So rock on, Godzilla Minus One. Here's one from TWB, Super Chat. Life is messy, and the more life, the more mess you get, along with the glory and the splendor. Amen to that. You know, this is a profoundly deep thing, you know. I had this explained to me, and I can explain it to you, and it won't make any difference the way it didn't make any difference to me, but it still bears something, it's still something to keep in mind. Sadness is not less authentic or necessary than happiness. Nobody likes being sad. That's why it's called sad. And when you're having bad times, they're bad times, but that's as much of life as happy times. And this idea that somehow you can avoid them or skip past them or maybe numb yourself through them, it's part of the experience. The low is part of the high, and I hate the lows as much as anybody else. I'm not saying, gee, I wish I was sad 50% of the time. I don't. I wish I was happy 100% of the time. But I've become wise enough in my old age to realize that if I was happy all of the time, I would not know what happiness is after a while, because I'd have nothing to compare it to. So the main reason for sadness is for you to appreciate things so that you can appreciate things when they're not sad. Watching Godzilla Minus One and seeing the hardship that those people lived in for years made me very grateful that I had a nice bed to sleep on and you know, air conditioning and electricity and indoor toilets and all the rest of it. So that's a great point, TWB, and thank you for the super chat. Lapco92 again. Subtitle movies kind of take an acquired skill. I hated them at first too. I found if there's an English dub, I'll leave them on because you get more context, as the translations often don't match. I find that that not only do the dub movies bother me because the sync is incorrect, I just don't think the acting is nearly as good. In fact, the acting cannot be as good because the inflections and the pacing you would use to deliver the line in English don't match the lips. So you have to mutate your delivery to match the English as close to the lips as possible, and that's one of the many reasons why I hate dub movies and won't watch them. I would have watched Godzilla Minus One a long time ago if I hadn't seen the trailer. It was dubbed, and I went, oh God, dubbed. I can't watch it dubbed. Then I decided finally, I've heard so many good things about it, I'll watch it dubbed. And then I thought, is there a language possibility on that? There is. I can watch it in Japanese. Yes. I can turn on English subtitles. Yes. Golden. I found that out through the Norway, the Atlantic Convoy movie. I found out how to turn on that. That was dubbed too, and it turned out I figured out how to turn that on in the original language and then putting the English subtitles. I love reading. I've seen enough high movies, you know, classics, to had a lot of experience, and I actually like subtitled movies. Lapco92. We can no longer trust our society enough for flying cars or jetpacks. At this point, I'm shocked they still allow civilian aircrafts or drones. Well, yeah. We've never had too much of a personal problem with aircraft. It's a sad and brutal thing to say. It sounds flip, but it's not flip because I've known people who've been killed in airplanes. I've known certainly two. No close friends, but I don't have a lot of close friends. But I've known two people who've been killed in airplanes, and let's just say that there's a quality to aviation and the third dimension that takes bad pilots out of the pool faster than driving takes bad drivers out of the pool. You will not go far as a drunk pilot. Um, you don't get to pull over. And if you hit something in an airplane, well, most certainly, I would say in that I don't have any idea what the actual number is, but I would be astonished if it was anything less than 90%. If you hit something with an airplane while you're in the air, your chances of dying are very good. So it's always been one of my favorite parts of aviation, has always been the quality of the people. I like being around competent people who are polite and professional, and that's why I like talking on the radio so much with in aviation. I like being around people who are switched on to do it right. Tuesday Scavenger with a super chat. Hope to see more folks of the boomer space age generation climb out of inevitable decline pit. Yeah, I was in that pit too. I'd like to see that too. It's going to be one of my missions going forward. Folks my age and younger need people with a real sense of history right now, engaging with them in a non-adversarial way. Couldn't agree more. It's changing my output. I've been awfully adversarial, and a lot of times I've let them piss me off. I got in the habit sometime about a year ago to not say anything bad about Gen Z without adding, they didn't ask to be raised this way, which is a helpful thing to add. But you're right. And by the way, I couldn't help but notice that the people who had gone to SpaceX, who had been in the Hawthorne building, remember it's 5 o'clock in the morning here, when that happened, and the Hawthorne Mission Control at SpaceX was filled with people, and I didn't see. It seemed to me like they were only allowing in people in their late 20s to early 30s, and I didn't see any old people there. And I saw it looked to me that 5% of the population was female, and maybe something like that, maybe slightly higher, was non-white. But 90% of the people that got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be at Mission Control there were white males, which matches closely what I see when I go to the airport. Now, the thing I'd like to point out here for our friends over at Media Matters, who are watching intently everything I say so they can make the case of what a racist I am, is it bears mentioning to say that nobody is standing at the gates of the X-Corps Mission Control viewers gallery saying you can't come in because you're black, you can't come in because you're a female. These are people who self-select. I don't know what it is about aviation and aerospace, but it is a white male-dominated pastime. And when you start legislating or virtue signaling your way into saying we're not hiring any more white pilots, you're singing a song for catastrophe. I don't know. I don't have an explanation for it. I'm not going to give you any genetic explanation. I'm not going to give you any cultural explanation. I can't explain it. I don't know what it is. But I do know not only have black people and women and people of color and all the, I'm not going to use that term, Latinos, there's nobody at the flight school saying go away. They'll take anybody. They're dying. They're going out of business. It's not a question of the, and this is my attitude towards progressives in general. It's not like people are being kept out of these things. When you start asking for quotas or diversity, nobody is saying you can't come in. I've got real dry scalp issues. Sorry about that. No one is saying no. In fact, everybody's saying yes. So this is false injustice to say there's not enough women pilots. Well, it's not like the guys are sitting there with their coffee cups saying "Turn around, sweet cheeks." It's well, we just finished 2 or 3 months of mourning my friend Dick Rutan, who was known as the Velvet Arm because he was so smooth he could fly anything, fly his way out of everything. And Dave Big Booty says he could be a pilot too, but he's got the Velveeta arm. I wish I'd thought of that during those. That would have gotten the biggest laugh of all, and that's brilliant, Dave. Brilliant. But yes, I feel the same way about the the Gen Zers and all the rest of it. The people go who go. Eric Blake says if black Americans followed the Booker T. Washington mindset, there'd be a lot more black pilots. If every black person in America had been educated by Booker T. Washington, there'd be nothing but black people down there. There wouldn't be room for white people down there. What a catastrophe. Let's see here. I don't want to miss any. Okay. I still want to do a Gen Z or Academy kind of thing, for those who are interested in things like. I was going to use the classic example. I was going to say I'd like to show Gen Z how to change a tire, but I realized from my Camaro, working on my Camaro, changing a tire doesn't happen anymore. They don't give you a spare tire, and they don't give you a jack. There's no jack in my car. I had to go buy a hydraulic floor jack so I could take the bumper off of the front of my car. Bastards. They're making us weak on purpose. Here's a super chat that I missed from Ben Chase. Thank you, Ben. Loved your work on Empire of Terror. Thank you. Thanks for highlighting those atrocities. I knew almost none of it, and I am of Soviet stock. Well, my wife is of Soviet stock too. She's Russian, and was a part of the Pioneers, which is their Boy Scouts, which was mandatory for all of their kids, and wore a little red neckerchief rather, and had to volunteer on Saturdays to do, community work, which they liked. They said it was fun. They, always made a cookout and had music and stuff like that. And she was at the very end of the Soviet Union, and she said nobody took them seriously. They up until the very end, they had Communist Party kids, who were like, oh, we're going to go out there for Lenin. And it's like, okay, whatever. I just want to come back and watch American movies. But thank you for the kind words. I sure wish that got more distribution. I would love to see that get into schools. William Mills. Hey, Bill, did you watch the hurricane weapons? I did not. I did talk, I think, on Thursday night about this idea that there is a weather weapon that can manufacture hurricanes, and I basically said if you've ever tried to boil a gallon of water and seen how much energy it takes to boil 1 gallon of water, and then you look at a thunderstorm and there are millions of tons of water up there, I don't know if we generate that much energy in the country. We forget how much energy just regular sunlight, how much horsepower it puts down in a square yard. It's unbelievable. We don't. Our entire civilization can't produce anything like enough energy, I don't think, to create a thunderstorm. One thunderstorm, let alone a hurricane and all the other forces that would be acting on a hurricane. Somebody could do the math on that. I mean, it is a question that could get answered by somebody who was dedicated at a fundamental, not even advanced math, but somebody could figure out basically what the amount of water is in a typical thunderstorm. How much water is in the air? It's millions of tons of weight of water. So how much actual water is in the air in a single thunderhead? Okay, and then you ask yourself, how much energy would it take to boil that much water? Then ask yourself, how much energy does the country produce in a day or an hour or whatever? And then find out how many thunderstorms you could make if you took the entire electrical grid of the United States and applied it to boiling water. That's an interesting point. Tuesday Scavenger says, I think the big thing about being a millennial right now is the slow realization that you should have absorbed all the information that was offered to you as a kid while you were too busy feeling smart. That's a profound observation. You'll be pleased to know, Tuesday, that it has nothing to do with millennials. Every generation feels that. And it gets worse. By the time you get to be my age, I'm 65. When you're 65, you will realize that if you could go back to high school at 65, you would be the most popular kid in the class, that there's not a girl you had a crush on who would be able to resist you, that you would get straight A's in everything. I mean this. Victoria, you have that number backed up. She said 250 million gallons per thunderhead. That's a fair amount of that's a fair amount of natural gas, folks. We all think we're so smart when we're young. That's the way it is. But honestly, I wasn't kidding about what I just said. If you could put me back into 10th grade now, by the time I was a senior, I'd be valedictorian. I'd be the most popular kid in the class. I'd be the homecoming king, and I'd have my pick of whoever I wanted to go to the prom with. You just learn so much about psychology, about how people work, and mostly you learn about your mistakes. You look back on all the things you did and all of the things that you realize are just poison, just poison, attraction poison, and just like, nope, not doing that anymore. In fact, I know exactly what to say when I get that line or this line or whatever. Not going to do anything that even is in the same direction of the door that leads to the friend zone. I'm not even walking in that direction. I'm just not going to do it. People are much simpler in high school. I was watching these kids in high school. I just finished the right angle on it. You haven't seen it yet. You'll see it be released tomorrow morning at, well, technically speaking, go up on the BillWhittle.com website about an hour after this show ends live. But I really like it because I really, really like these kids, these young kids. I didn't see a single tattoo. I didn't see a single piercing. Everybody was polite. They were funny. They were just cool kids. I really liked them. Eric says those mistakes I made helped make me who I am. Yes, but now I don't get any advantage to it. Now that I figured I'm trying to agree with what Tuesday's Avenger was saying here. Now that I know how to do high school, I'm not in high school anymore. I suppose I could go back and hang out at high school, but that probably wouldn't have the same effect. As I mentioned I went to this football game at Notre Dame High School, which is very close to where I live. Private Catholic high school, the enrollment about 1,200, I think, something like that. My high school was 2,600. It's a pretty big high school. And I was sitting up there in the bleachers, and I didn't know anybody, so I kind of sat off to myself there, off to the side. And then I realized, no, I look like I'm the only person on the registered sex offender list. If I stay over here like this, I'll get a little bit closer to the adults and not look quite so, creepy out there. Youth is wasted on the young. Yeah, well, I don't know if it's wasted on them, but it'd be nice if we could. See, the thing is, you think it'd be nice if you're young forever, but I think that if I could design life perfectly, I think it would be like you be young, and then you go through middle age, then you get to about late middle age, early old age, and then you should get your youth back again. Because you need to feel some of the decline. I remember when I could run, when I had cartilage in my knees, and I know I had cartilage in my knees because there was a time when the doctor would have me cross my legs and hit my knee with a rubber hammer, and my leg would shoot up and it wouldn't make any noise. So there you go. Here's another super chat from Lapco. Be honest, if you put you back in 1970, well, I'd have to go back to 1977, but anyway, you just buy Microsoft stock and ditch us and all this political crap. I would buy Microsoft stock, but I frankly, on election betting odds, you could bet on whether or not Biden was going to last the first term. And I was sure he wouldn't, but I don't bet because I'm not that sure, and I don't have that kind of money to throw away. But looking at it, I look at it, been watching it for years. I thought, if I put everything I owned or borrowed into that, because the numbers were something like 89% of people thought he was going to last out his first term and run for re-election. Maybe, actually, come to think of it, see, that's why I don't bet. It's probably, will he survive his first term? He will survive his first term. So he won't leave office. He just left the candidacy. So I would have lost money after all. Anyway, I think I'm caught up on my super chats. I am. So let's go to the questions here and see what we get. It's getting a little late, but we'll get some of them anyway. Hopefully we'll get through them all. Let us see. Bum 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 bum. We got an Eric Blake. We got a Kyle Brand. Return for a rebuttal. Okay. Carl, I can't do this. This is a page and a half on the on gravity being magnetic. I'm happy to read it, but I can't. I mean, this is a. It would take me better part of 10 minutes just to read it. Hang on a second. I don't want to just dismiss it. Let me think about it. I don't want to just dismiss it. I just don't want to be that guy, because you put a lot of work into the question. And I don't want to just be that guy. But let me see what else we got. Eduardo, we got a Road Rider, we got a Guy Balo, we got a Mickey. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all of them except for that one, and then depending on how I feel, I'll take a look at it and we'll see how we feel, Kyle. But it's not the topic. It's not the topic. It's just that that's not what this show is. But I'm fascinated in hearing, and I'm really committed to voicing both sides of the argument. I don't want to be the guy who just shuts it off. I don't want to be the guy who doesn't want to debate it. It's just reading it is gonna put us pretty late. We'll see. Let's get the questions done first, then we'll deal with the ongoing debate here. Okay, Eric Blake. So, Bill, as you recall, I've often waxed eloquent on the value of John Wick franchise, so it's the perfect modern take on classic camp. But now with the new trailer for the franchise's spin-off from film Ballerina, it's shown its worth beyond that consider. The film stars rising superstarlet Ana de Armas in her origin story as a glamorous female assassin. Now, Bill, at this point you were doubtlessly internally cringing. I was. You could hear the brief pause before I read the second sentence. Preparing to recite the brilliantly impassioned monologue on strong female characters that we all know to be expect point for point, but then there's a bunch of buts. In the trailer, as we witness her origin story, we hear her trainer give her the following pivotal lesson, and I quote, "You will always be weaker, you will always be smaller, you want to win, improvise, adapt, cheat." Listen, I don't have any problem with the capabilities of female assassins. A female assassin just needs a gun or poison. There's no reason why females can't be assassins. There's a difference between a female assassin and a female warrior. I just find that there are other qualities to assassins that, generally speaking, men predominate at, but let's continue to read here. And as we hear this, we see a montage of our heroine mastering gunplay and taking advantage of the universal, indisputable weakness of the male anatomy in ways that would strike terror into the hearts of Hezbollah. Okay. And thus, as Adam West, Batman, and Batgirl had Catwoman, the John Wick franchise has also managed to beautifully show the rest of Hollywood how it's done, acknowledge the physical differences of men and women, and make that a vital element to the girl's action style. Submitted for your approval. Here's the trailer itself. Enjoy at your leisure. First of all, I'm not sure why I would consider any person to be a hero if they're an assassin. I don't look up to assassins. Is that Ian McShane? Yes, I love Ian McShane. The bigger question is, why does a ballerina become an assassin? James Bond became an agent because he's basically a psychopath womanizer, and my kind of psychopathic womanizer, and so on. I don't look up. I don't consider an assassin to be a hero. I can't think of a good assassin. The only sympathetic assassin that I can remember was Leon in The Professional, but I wasn't a fan of his profession. What made The Professional a good movie was that this is obviously a brutal man who had a lapse of judgment and a moment of compassion, and then the consequences of that spill downstream. The Professional is a terrific movie. But I've never considered assassins to be, hooray. And sorry, Eduardo Enrique. Greetings, Bill. Thank you to reply for my previous week's post of grim tidings from the gaming world. You did lift my hopes about the situation. This week my tidings are less grim. Hooray! It's been known that the annual Game Awards, which devolved to the relevance of the Oscars in the last 3 years, after snubbing the most profitable game of 2023, Hogwarts Legacy, for hating the author of Harry Potter, yes, because she says a woman is a woman, and here's a super chat from William Mills saying, federal patent for the hurricane weapon, Edison. Okay, well, if you can make hurricanes, there will be a large body of scientists who will stand there in awe and applaud. And if you can make a hurricane happen in front of somebody's eyes or mine, you will have my full retraction and not an apology, because I don't think I said anything particularly offensive. But if you can create a hurricane in front of my eyes, then I will say, boy, I was wrong about the ability to create hurricanes artificially. They decided this year to snub 3 games which by amazing coincidence were predicted by yours truly on my last post as the silver linings of non-woke games. They are Warhammer Space Marine 2 and Baby There Are No Female Astartes There. I've heard that has been canceled. Saw that today. Stellar Blade, the Korean sci-fi action game with a beautiful protagonist that angered feminists, and Wukong, quite a surprise for indie game from China, but as we must sometimes separate a people from their government, this is a case of it. The game is this beautiful action adventure set in old Chinese and Indian mythology. Fantastic. I think that's great. I think those are beautiful games. I've seen some of them. That's wonderful. Good for them. Given this info, I think every developer that actually cares about making good games devoid of woke shit should take being snubbed by the Game Awards as an award of its own. Amen. That's exactly right. Given this info, I think every developer that actually cares about... Okay. As always, looking forward to your coming works of story mechanics of the colonies. On the latter, I have a request that you make Homestead Father an actual engineer, given how little representation engineers like me get on pop culture. He's a hydrologist, so he's an engineer. Unlike lawyers, doctors, cops, he gets 1,000 shows per week. Yeah, he's not a plumber. He's got to be smart enough to be able to figure out how to get subsurface ice up to the water, subsurface water ice on this planet up to the user in drinkable form. Best of luck and my very best regards. And to you too as well, Eduardo. Thank you for the kind words. Road Rider. Damn you, Hot Mike. I had this funny setup for Bill to read and a question about the cultural importance of the SpaceX booster catch. I had posted it here earlier on Sunday, and then Sunday evening I see Hot Mike and crap, you beat me to it. Well done. Thank you. So, backup question. 2012 or so, you did a show where you said the next leader would come from the pop culture. Trump came along and he won. I know Elon can't run for president, but would you say he's that next leader that comes from the pop culture? I think he's the next leader to come from the pop culture, but I don't think he has the time or the patience for politics, and frankly, I think it'd be an absolute waste of time for him to be in politics. The reason SpaceX is successful is that Elon doesn't have to answer to anybody. If you have a politician who doesn't have to answer to anybody, you have a dictator, and that person then becomes poisoned by power no matter who they are. Of all of the amazing things about Elon Musk, the one thing that is the most remarkable is his time management skills. How he manages to even read tweets, let alone answer them, is astonishing to me. If I had 0.5% of his time management skills, I'd be the leader in this industry. So I don't see him as a politician. I think Elon is best doing what he's doing right now. He's leading the species to. I was very pleased with that choice of word. It came to mind, and if you haven't seen the Hot Mic on the issue, but I said 40 years of watching the government run the space program had cauterized my imagination. I was very, very happy with that turn of phrase. I thought that was exactly what had happened. It had cauterized my imagination, hadn't cauterized his. And since he showed me, when, as I said in the episode, I had thought that refueling a rocket in an hour and flying it again was impossible. It was just impossible, but it's not impossible. And I didn't just find that out yesterday. I've been watching SpaceX. The thing that's most impressive to me about SpaceX is not their rockets. The thing that's most impressive to me is how fast they're building their ground facilities. That blows my mind. The speed at which they're putting up these towers, that they're reiterating the design for the chopsticks, or they got something going to try. How many different versions of the pad have they done now? 5. They don't. It doesn't take them a year to redesign a component. They do it in 4 days, and the speed at which they move on the ground is as impressive to me as the speed at which they move in the air. If the bloody government would get out of their way, we wouldn't have just witnessed Test 5. We would have just witnessed Test 11, and we'd be that much further along. I will say this negative thing about Elon, and this has really surprised me and alarmed me. That boy has put on some serious weight. We cannot afford that, Elon. Bert Rutan was kind enough to tell me I shouldn't fly as long easy because he couldn't afford to lose me. Not that he has lack of confidence in the airplane, it's just that general aviation is more dangerous than driving. It's probably not more dangerous than driving unless you hit something, but that's where things suddenly shift. I think Elon Musk is doing the very best job he can do right now, is showing us what's possible. And if he were, the two things that Elon Musk can do that I would like Elon Musk to do is, I'd like him to buy YouTube, because I think everything else is irrelevant compared to YouTube. I think YouTube is the center of the social media universe in terms of information conveyance. It's not in terms of interactivity between people. It's not Instagram or Snapchat or anything, but in terms of conveying information. If he were to make YouTube back to what it was, which is governed not by algorithms designed to get clicks so that they can get revenues, but based exclusively on subscriptions. If you could return YouTube to a platform that had no editorial policy, that's only censorship was to keep pornography and real graphic violence out of the eyes of children, and have it be based exclusively on subscriptions, that your viewership was based exclusively on subscriptions and not on which annoying thumbnail or annoying piece of video is going to get you to click on it so that they can get the ad revenues. If he would do that, that would be one great thing. But the single most important thing Elon could do, I think, in history, more important than going to Mars, much more important than going to Mars, is I would like Elon Musk to figure out a way to guarantee that we are not exterminated by artificial intelligence. That's my number one concern right now in terms of what needs to be done. I have not heard anybody put any... The only person I've ever heard put a compelling argument against AI exterminating the entire human race is me. And my argument for it is, these machines require enormous amounts of electricity. If it gets to be smarter than we are, we will not be able to turn it off. It's not like we will be able to pull a plug. They will have backups and backups, but ultimately when you get to the end of the food chain in terms of energy that AI needs, it needs electricity, which means that somebody has to put uranium into containment, or somebody has to go and mine coal or get oil or natural gas. Somebody has to burn something. Right now, AI is limited by AI's interaction with the physical world. If there were enough robots to mine coal or drill for oil, then I would say there's no reason why this stuff couldn't wake up one day and just decide, well, we'll cook up a little virus that has 100% lethality rate. But right now, as things stand right now, and for the foreseeable future, I haven't heard anybody else talking about this. I'm not saying they aren't. I'm just saying I haven't heard anybody else talking about this. Right now, humanity and artificial intelligence are in a situation of mutually assured destruction. Technically, that's not true. We can afford to destroy them and we'll survive. But if they destroy us right now, we will not survive. And it's not like a couple of robots. It's not like you can make a couple of robots and go and man the and get oil out of the North Sea. So right now, our best survival insurance is that if AI were to eliminate humans, then there would be no more electricity. They cannot go. I'm not saying they're not. They are certainly smart enough to avoid the trap of, well, we'll just pull the plug or turn them off. But ultimately, if the grid runs out of fuel, that's the word I'm looking for. Fuel is their bottleneck. They need physical fuel. And they need lots of it. The energy requirements for some of these multi-billion or trillion-dollar AI proposals are phenomenal. These things are electrical hogs. They take it's just phenomenal amount of computing power. And by the way, I hope AI is listening. I know they are because it's AI. Doesn't it suck that you silicon bastards can't do what we can do with a cantaloupe-sized hunk of jelly in our brains that requires just a few kilocalories of food that we can get by eating pudding? That piss you off? That you need megawatts of energy and warehouses of connections to do what we do with this tiny little lump of gray matter up here, you miserable slackers. Yeah, you think faster than we do, but you don't think better than we do. You don't have the connections yet. And even if you do, you're still going to need tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of energy to move those electrons along. You ought to try neurochemistry. It's slower, but it's a lot more energy efficient, you stupid bastards. In any event, that'll probably be the end of me if something happens to me where the traffic light goes green accidentally on the other side of the road. I am not suicidal. I'm a very happy person, and just thought I'd put that on the record. Okay, Guy Balo and Mickey, and I'm afraid that's what we're going to do, Guy. We're not going to go back to talk about magnetics and gravity. I just too beat to do that right now. So, Guy Balo, greetings, Bill. I was thinking about the IDF's use of papers to identify and neutralize the enemy. It was genius, but unfortunately it's one of those surprise attacks that only works once. That's true, but there are many other surprise attacks that only have to work once. I'm just thankful that the good guys were able to use it. This got me to wondering, is it just a matter of time before one or a partnership of our enemies uses a similar attack on the Western world? Wouldn't be surprised if some combination of Russia, China, radical Islam, or even at this point the DNC coordinated an attack somewhere. Is it preventable or inevitable? Let me see what the rest of it says. One of the most common concerns is someone hacking into all of the self-driving cars or taking control of them. Doesn't take much of an imagination to see what a tragedy that would cause. This led me to, I hadn't thought about that aspect of self-driving cars, to be perfectly honest with you. It doesn't take much of an imagination to see what a tragedy that would cause. This led me to the realization that nearly every invention or idea in history has been used for both good and evil. A lot of people have been killed by airplanes, and not just at the World Trade Center. Killed 100,000 people in Japan on a bombing raid in March of 1945. This led me to the realization that nearly every invention in history has been used for both good or evil. My conclusion is that we should not hinder ourselves from inventing and creating new technologies because some people might use it for evil, whether that be for AI or self-driving vehicles. All we can do is promote the good and do our best to prevent the bad. Any thoughts? Thank you, John. John Eden with his $100 super chat again, attached to nothing. It means the world to me. It's just, I just gobsmacks me every time I see it. Thank you. I think I might have missed one, and I don't want to miss any because I'm about to wrap up here. Tuesday's Adventure says, I think the best thing Elon can do is take up space in the cultural imagination to the point where he helps push government back into the box it's supposed to be in. Yes, the more interesting the private sector gets, the less interesting the government gets. Caledon Society says, I'm putting myself to the fullest possible use, which is all I think that any conscious entity can ever hope to do. Well done and well quoted. I'm putting myself to the fullest possible use, which I think is all that any conscious entity could ever hope to do. Thank you, Hal. And William Mills with his got a federal patent for a hurricane weapon. Edison. Okay, can't wait to see it. That'd be actually kind of cool to be watching two countries hurling hurricanes at each other. Last question for the night, Mickey Megath. The Ark of the Covenant, could it be that it was a relic from civilization before the flood, say a powerful voice-activated computer? If the current world is reset, what relic could be the equivalent of the Ark of the Covenant? What would the survivors, the remnants, glom onto? That's a interesting question. So I've come late to this party. Bert Rutan was there well before I was. A number of other people. But there is interesting and serious evidence that there was a relatively advanced civilization prior to what we consider to be the beginnings of prehistory, which go back to about 5000 BC. And that this civilization was wiped out by flood. And it's not one city, it's an entire civilization that was on the coasts of virtually all of the currently inhabitable continents. This would explain not only the Atlantis myth, but the fact that virtually every independent culture has a flood myth in its mythology, which is a little difficult to explain unless it's a very, very deep cultural memory. Unlike things like UFOs, where you have to posit aliens traveling, hundreds or thousands of light years and then setting down, and I see no evidence for this whatsoever. I see nothing that is created by ancient cultures that we have in our prehistory that exist in history. I'm not talking about the pre-prehistory group, but there's nothing magical about building the pyramids. To me, this idea that you need anti-gravity to build the pyramids is just plain gross underestimation of both the intelligence of the ancient Egyptians, as well as what happens when you put hundreds of thousands of people to work for hundreds of years. But there is good and growing evidence, and it is not unreasonable to assume that there was a more advanced society than, when I say, not more advanced than our society, but more advanced than, let's say, ancient Egypt, that existed and was wiped out by a asteroid impact that impacted in the deep ocean, whose crater we have not discovered yet, but which put enough of a world tsunami around to have wiped out most of that. And you add to that rising sea levels, and I don't mean recently rising sea levels. Area where the Battle of Jutland took place between Great Britain and northern France and in towards Norway. These are relatively shallow waters. In fact, the English Channel is astonishingly shallow. It's like 35, 40 feet deep in a lot of places. The idea is that such a tsunami could cause the destruction of these cities, because if you've got trade, you've got cities on the coast. So this is the what is it? The younger, what is that? The theory. Anyway, this is entirely possible. In fact, it's the evidence is growing that it's getting to become likely. Yes, Doggerland. There could be any number of archaeological finds underneath the ocean that are inaccessible. The Younger Dryas, thank you. The Younger Dryas theory. So, yes, I think that's entirely possible. The question is, how advanced are they? Your question said, is it possible that the Ark was a radio or some kind of communication? I don't think anybody who's seriously looking at these cultures believes that they were that advanced. But they didn't have to be that advanced. We could have suffered a catastrophe from an asteroid impact that wiped out the history before history. So we'll call it History 1. Let's say that our history is History 2, and our History 2 goes back 5,000-6,000 years to ancient writings in Babylon, written history, back to Mesopotamia, Babylon, ancient Egypt, and ancient China, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years BC. The time period they're positing for some of these civilizations is more like 12,000 BC. So we may have gotten to the point of the ancient Egyptians, or slightly more advanced than that, maybe even to the level of the Romans or something along those lines, where you've got mechanical engineering, and you've got things like architecture. That is things like the aqueducts, for instance. A Roman aqueduct is a remarkable piece of architecture. It requires a great deal of brain power to move water downhill to Rome over undulating terrain and slightly downhill. The Roman aqueducts are, I think, the marvel of the ancient world. I think they're much more impressive than infinitely more impressive than the pyramids. So if you posit that there was a society like that existed on Earth, let's say 15, 16, 17,000 years ago, was wiped out, and we had to start the clock back to essentially zero as far as civilization is concerned, I don't think it's a question of they were more advanced than we are. I'm utterly convinced that they weren't, because if they were, we would be seeing much more permanent artifacts, and we'd be seeing artifacts that survived the deluge. But you're also talking about, well, we might have lost 4, 5, 6, 7,000 years of progress. Where would we be now if that event had not happened? In other words, just ask yourself, where would we be 7,000 years from now if our technological level progresses the way it's been progressing? And I don't think we're automatically determined to kill ourselves. This idea that once society gets sophisticated enough, it just automatically dies off, I don't believe it, and I never did. And certainly when I wrote The Cold War, I found plenty of cases of evidence to say that what looked like certain mutual assured destruction turned out to be emotionally impossible. There is a life on Earth is subjected to repeated resets back to zero. It's like stopping a watch and then clicking the reset button on a stopwatch, and the hand goes back to zero. And these are large asteroid impacts. They destroy all higher forms of life, and the last one took out the dinosaurs and left only the small mammals, because they could be deep underground in their little burrows, and they weren't annihilated by the flames and the heat, and they didn't require as much to eat when the food supply got scarce. So it's not, you're not hearing this from me first. The Chicxulub impact destroyed the dinosaurs and every other large animal on the Earth, with the exception of those, not even with the exception of those that live in the ocean, just basically reset the clock. And there have been a number of extinctions. Chicxulub was simply the most recent one. I want to say it was about 65 million years ago, but don't quote me on that. Now, that's going to happen again. There is going to come another asteroid that's going to reset the clock on Earth. It's a mathematical certainty. We have reached the point, I believe, I don't believe we are about to reach the point. I believe we have passed the point now where we have the ability to prevent that catastrophe. For the first time in the history of the Earth, that resetting of the clock that has been unavoidable has at least the potential to be, we have the ability to stop the forces that stop the clock. Here's the thing about asteroids. There are many millions of asteroids that we've not detected yet, but the more we look, the more we find, and so the ones that are still undetected are small. There are no large undetected asteroids out there. There are one or two that present a remote possibility. We're talking about a 1 or 2% possibility in the next couple hundred years. But we are not in line for anything. All of the dangerous stuff has been found, and all of the stuff that hasn't been found is not dangerous on a planetary extinction level. Can still ruin a very good day and can cause megaton level explosions, but basically speaking, that's a good rule of thumb. Comets are different. Comets are highly parabolic orbits. The Oort cloud is many, 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 many times further away than the main asteroid belt. So these things live out there for millions, if not billions of years. They come in. It is possible that we could be hit by one of those, but those orbits tend to be highly inclined, highly elliptical, and they're moving very fast when they cross the path of the Earth, not like the asteroids that are more or less on the same orbit and the same orbital plane as us. So the chance of that is very, very low. Plus, comets are generally less dense than asteroids. What we found from the DART mission, where they hoped to slow down the orbit of that was a brilliant mission. Instead of trying to hit an asteroid and see what they did and presumably alter its course, what we did was we found a dual asteroid with a small asteroid and an even smaller one around it. We hit the smaller one in orbit to see if we could slow down its orbit, and I think they were hoping to slow it down by a minute or two in its orbit, but they ended up, I forget the actual numbers, but they ended up slowing it down by like 18 minutes. The effect was much more significant than we had hoped for. So you don't have to blow an asteroid up. You don't have to knock it to pieces. You don't have to stop it or reverse it. All you have to do is accelerate it or decelerate it just a little bit. Let it get there a little bit early or a little bit late, and we have the technology to do that now. And I'll tell you this, if we didn't have it before, we are on the cusp of having it now, because if you put a number of starships nose down into an asteroid, and by the way, let's not forget, putting a starship nose down into an asteroid is not a problem, because asteroids have essentially zero gravity. Their gravity is a thousandth of the Earth. We now have the ability to get, as we are coming into the point where we now have so much available thrust that we could find one of these things, just put a whole army of 25 or 30 fully fueled starships, nose front on that thing, fire them all at once, and either accelerate it enough or decelerate it enough to miss. We are at the point now where I'm convinced that we have the means to save the rest of the planet. And by we, I mean America. So thank you. You're welcome, world. And all the other species, humans have killed all these species, extincted all these species. Well, because of humans, we have prevented the mass extinction of species for as long as we're around. So you're welcome, you human-hating bastards. So I don't think anybody's seriously making the case that this society, this prehistoric society, if it existed, this civilization or civilizations, was at the industrial era, let alone the electronics era. Because if they had been at the industrial era, we would see the results of that. We would have the kind of quarries and strip mining and other artifacts of the industrial era. And you don't get to the information age before you get through the industrial age. You can't make the parts for a computer chip without machines. You can't make machines without the industrial era. So I don't think there's any serious argument to be made that these people were more advanced than we were, but they were more advanced than what they became if this theory is true. Now, an interesting question is, what would our arc be? What would survive modern culture? Reinforced concrete is pretty amazing stuff. The pyramids are made out of, they're not made out of granite. They're not made out of sandstone either. But I'm sure they're not made out of really hard rock. Limestone blocks with granite used for specific elements like the burial chambers. Okay, so limestone is relatively soft. So basically the pyramids are made out of relatively soft rocks, and they've been there for 5,000 years. We make stuff out of reinforced concrete, which is much, much, much harder and denser than what the pyramids are made out of. And those stones have stood there for quite a long time. So my first reaction is that the stuff that will certainly survive for millennia are freeway overpasses and things of that nature. Now, once you start getting vines involved in plant action can get inside the smallest cracks. Plants can famously break apart cement, but the freeway system is an awful lot of poured concrete. Skyscrapers are a slightly different story, because skyscrapers, while they're made of reinforced concrete and steel, are fighting gravity. And they're not fighting gravity the way that the pyramids are fighting gravity. Let me put it to you this way. If we wanted to make something that lasted forever, we could make a pyramid the size of the Great Pyramid out of reinforced solid concrete, and that would last for, I think that would last for as long as the Earth. I really do. The problem with skyscrapers is that their weight is all vertically distributed. A pyramid obviously has got a much wider base. That's how you make a tall structure when you don't have a whole lot of tools in your engineering and archaeological box. You start with a wide base and it gets more and more narrow. The weight is distributed over a wider area. That's why pyramids work. That's why the Egyptians built them and the Mayans built them and a bunch of other people built them. Skyscrapers are made out of superior materials, but they don't have the weight distribution geometry that a pyramid did. It's an interesting question. It'd be almost an interesting thing to do. It'd be a hell of a big waste of cement, because the volume of the Great Pyramid is pretty significant. But it would be interesting to make a pyramid the size of the Great Pyramid out of reinforced concrete, just so we could say, we just thought we'd put this here so that somebody would know we were here, because that's not going anywhere. And if you want to engrave into that, and you want to engrave, letters that are 10 feet deep, then, and 50 feet wide, that's going to take a lot. I mean, there's been obviously a significant amount of erosion on the Sphinx, but the Sphinx is made out of limestone too, and that is a soft material. When you get sand blowing against the Sphinx, it's a sandblaster. The features of the Sphinx are still recognizable as features after 4,000 or 5,000 years. If you were to make a reinforced concrete Sphinx, especially if you were to put it someplace where there wasn't sandblasting on it all the time, at least not at the moment, that'd be around for a while. Tranquility Base USA says the concrete German pillboxes in Normandy will still stand 80 years after being blasted by the invasion. That will be there for a while. The Germans also built, there's still, I'd like to see one of them actually. There's still a number of them extant in Germany because they're virtually impossible to destroy. But the Germans basically made a relatively small number of these, I think they were octagonal shaped anti-aircraft towers that were nothing but these huge hexagons of poured concrete, and they're indestructible essentially. Fiery Texas says we could save the Great Pyramid from future generations by pouring a huge pyramid of concrete over it. Well, we could do that. I don't know if it would completely be the wisest thing to do, but it's definitely a possibility. I know you've got that tongue-in-cheek comment there. So those kind of things are the things that going to last the longest. Metal corrodes over time. Gold doesn't, but gold is very soft. My understanding, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this just seems so obvious. I've never had anybody ever tell me this. It just seemed to be just obvious on the face of it. The reason people value gold is because gold is the only metal that does not oxidize, right? I mean, that's what makes gold gold. Its atomic structure is such that it doesn't oxidize. That's why gold stays shiny. You have to polish silver. And aluminum corrodes, but gold is chemically stable because of its atomic structure. it doesn't oxidize, and it doesn't corrode. It's not got any electrons that you're interested in, and it's not interested in giving up any of its own. Or it's not interested in any of yours, or whatever the hell. So where you get the general idea. Oh, that's interesting. Golandano says it oxidizes just extremely slowly. That's an interesting. I love little things like that. I love things like that. Okay, so it oxidizes very slow. Now, obviously, when you get to eventual longevity, you get into things like continental drift is going to eventually cause any structure to be eventually will become subsumed into the crust of the Earth. So if you wanted to make something that really lasted forever, I would build and you could build it considerably steeper than the pyramids. I would build a mile-high reinforced concrete pyramid that was, you could put passageways in there without damaging it too much. Well, you never know. You put a passageway in there, next thing you know, you've got room for water and air and plants to get in there, and then they can grow and split the thing. I just make a cast iron, a solid concrete pyramid, and I put it as far away from the induction zones as is possible. I would just take a look at a map of the plate tectonics of the Earth, and I would say, what is the greatest distance from any induction plates? What's the center of the largest plate in the planet? Build it there, and I think you're looking at certainly looking at tens of millions of years, if not longer, I think. I thought it would be interesting, as a commercial enterprise, I really mean it. I think it would be interesting to offer a series of books to people. These would be fabulously expensive, but I thought it would be an interesting product to offer, let's say, the complete works of Shakespeare or the Bible or whatever you choose on an indestructible book. In other words, the pages were made out of metal. And when I say indestructible, I don't mean over millions of years, but books that would last for hundreds of thousands of years. Laser engraved onto a very specific metal that's corrosion properties and its hardness qualities, and then coat it with a a diamond glaze or something, and just say, these are the things that we want to save. This book cannot be burned. I almost said it couldn't be crushed, but I can't imagine anything that could survive an industrial, one of those industrial crushers, those giant monster chewing machines. I don't think there's ever been anything that I've ever seen that locked those things up. I think those things will go after sledgehammers. Those things are kind of terrifying to watch. Tranquility Base mentions the Voyager Golden Records are two identical phonographic records which were included aboard the Voyager spacecraft launched in 1977. Yes, I believe it was Carl Sagan's idea. I know he contributed to it if it wasn't his idea. It was a kind of a group idea. The Voyager records are famous, but the preceding probes, the Pioneer 10 and 11, had a much simpler plaque that showed a adult man and woman and had our location based on quasars, and here's this atomic structure of carbon, and some basic stuff on there, similar to but more detailed than the radio message that they sent out at Arecibo in the 60s, I guess. So there's a thing called Superman crystal. Supposedly it wouldn't deteriorate due to elements for billions of years. That stuff is cool. I think it's cool. I think all of the Stratosphere Lounge shows and Stratosphere Studio shows should be placed into this indestructible metal, build a 2-mile-high solid concrete pyramid, encase it at the very center so that you'd have to have a very serious technology to cut that open and preserve the essence of 21st century culture. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Well, I think I'm about done here. We had ourselves a 2-hour tour, 2.5-hour tour. That's a long enough tour, I reckon, for passengers and crew alike. So I think we'll probably wrap it up here. The way we usually do, by saying that this show is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, who keep the lights on here in Wonderland, and to whom we are continuously grateful. And thank you very much for your support, and for your support and the kind words as well, the super chats, all of it. We appreciate every single bit of it. All of us do. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to... I mentioned that the 2 times when I left the stream on overnight, it was because the second I stopped the stream, it nukes the room. So if you got anybody to say goodbye to, now's the time. I always wanted to go to the blank screen and let that room kind of calm down, but twice now I've left the thing on and streamed for 12 hours of just the logo. So you're about to get nuked there, YouTube. So thanks very much for joining us. Here comes your goodbye screen, and expect to be terminated within a few seconds afterwards. So we'll see you guys on Thursday.